Imagine, if you will, the first light of dawn creeping over the high stone walls of a medieval monastery. The air is cool and still, carrying the faint scent of earth, barley, and wood smoke. Somewhere within these cloistered halls, a small group of monks moves quietly through their morning prayers before turning to their daily labor, one of the most peaceful and methodical tasks of the medieval world, the brewing of ale. The monastery at daybreak. In the hush of early morning, the monastery is a world apart, a place of order, devotion, and quiet industry. The brothers rise before the sun, their bare feet whispering against cold flagstones as they make their way to the chapel for matins, the first service of the day. Their robes, rough-spun wool and undyed shades of brown or black, swish softly with each step. The only sounds are the distant call of birds and the occasional creak of a wooden door. After prayers, the monks file into the refectory for a simple meal, perhaps coarse bread, a little cheese, and a sip of small beer, the weak, nourishing ale that sustains them through their daily work. Then, as the sky brightens, the brewers among them make their way to the brewery, a humble but vital part of the monastic complex. The brewery, a place of warmth and ritual. The brewery is a low timber-framed building, its walls darkened by years of smoke from the kiln. The air inside is thick with the comforting aroma of malt, roasted barley, slightly sweet, mingling with the damp earthiness of yeast. A large copper kettle hangs over the hearth, its surface gleaming dully in the firelight. Nearby, wooden troughs and barrels stand ready, their surfaces worn smooth by generations of use. Here, the monks work in near silence, their movements deliberate and practiced. There is no rush, no clamor, only the steady rhythm of a craft perfected over centuries. Each step, from milling the grain to stirring the mash, is performed with care, almost like a prayer. The fire crackles softly, water murmurs as it heats. Time seems to slow within these walls. The monastic brewer's tools. The tools of the medieval brewer are simple but finely made. A heavy stone quern grinds the barley into coarse flour. A wooden mash paddle, smoothed by years of use, stirs the mixture of grain and hot water. Clay jugs and wooden buckets stand ready to carry the precious liquid to the fermentation barrels. There is something deeply soothing in these objects. The weight of the paddle in the hands, the rough texture of the grain, the warmth of the copper kettle, each has its place, each its purpose. The monks handle them with reverence, for this is not just labor, it is an act of sustenance, of offering. Closing thoughts. As the morning stretches on, the brewery hums with quiet activity. The gentle bubbling of the mash, the scrape of wood against copper, the occasional murmur of a monk reciting a psalm under his breath. Here, in this secluded corner of the medieval world, time moves not in hours or minutes, but in the slow, steady progress of fermentation, in the patient waiting for ale to become what it is meant to be. Before the brewing can begin, there is the quiet work of preparation, the slow transformation of barley into malt, grain into flour. In the cool, dim storerooms of the monastery, the monks tend to this process with the same devotion they bring to their prayers. It is a task of patience, of allowing time and nature to work together. The barley's journey, from grain to malt. The barley arrives in rough hemp sacks, each kernel plump and golden, harvested from the monastery's own fields or traded from nearby villages. The brewers inspect it carefully, letting the grains run through their fingers, ensuring only the best will be used. The malting begins in a shallow stone trough where the barley is spread in a thin layer and soaked in fresh cold water. For 3 days, it rests, swelling gently, absorbing moisture. The monks turn it by hand each morning and evening, their palms brushing against the damp grain, the sound a soft, wet rustle. Then comes the germination. Spread upon the malting floor, the barley begins to sprout, tiny pale shoots curling from each kernel. The air here is cool and slightly sweet, the scent like fresh hay and earth. The monks walk among the grains, turning them with wooden rakes to keep them from tangling. The only sounds are the scrape of wood on stone and the occasional murmur of a whispered verse. After 5 days, when the shoots are just the right length, the grain is carried to the kiln, a small arched oven where a low fire smolders. Here the malt is dried, the heat slow and steady, the smoke curling up through a vent in the roof. The monks tend the fire in shifts, never letting it grow too fierce. The malt darkens slightly, taking on a warm, toasted aroma like bread fresh from the hearth. The mill, grinding the malt, once dried, the malt is carried to the mill, a heavy stone quern turned by hand, or in larger monasteries by a patient donkey walking in slow circles. The crunch of grain between the stones is rhythmic, almost meditative. The monks work in silence, pouring the malt into the mill's hopper, catching the coarse flour in a wide wooden trough below. The scent here is rich and comforting, warm malt, a little dusty, with a hint of sweetness. The flour is not fine like modern baking flour, but rough and granular, perfect for brewing. The monks sift it through woven sieves, separating the finest grit from the husks, which will later help filter the brew. A brewer's hands. The work is simple, repetitive, but never hurried. The monks' hands, rough from labor, yet careful in their movements, scoop, sift, and stir with quiet precision. Their robes are dusted with a fine coating of malt flour, their sleeves rolled to the elbow. There is no need for words. The rhythm of the task is enough. Closing thoughts. And so, as the sun drifts across the sky, the monastery's brewers prepare their malt. Kernel by kernel, handful by handful. There is no haste in this work, only the steady certainty that each step brings them closer to the ale that will sustain their brothers. The kiln's warmth lingers in the air. The millstone turns again and again, its sound a quiet hymn to patience. Now the quiet magic begins, the mingling of malt and water, the slow surrender of sweetness from grain. In the monastery brewery, steam curls upward like incense as the monks prepare the mash, their movements deliberate, their minds at peace. This is where ale is born, not in haste, but in warmth, in waiting. The mash tun, a vessel of transformation. The mash tun is a broad wooden vessel, its staves worn smooth by generations of use. One monk pours bucket after bucket of clear, heated water, drawn from the monastery's well or a nearby spring, while another stirs the malted flour into the liquid with a long wooden paddle. The mixture thickens slowly, turning from pale gold to a porridge-like consistency. The air fills with the scent of wet grain, earthy, slightly sweet, like fresh baked bread left to cool on a hearth. The steam rises in lazy spirals, warming the brewers' faces as they work. There is no clock here, only the monks' practice sense of time. They know by touch when the mash is ready, when the starches have dissolved into sugars, when the paddle moves through the liquid with just the right resistance. The fire's gentle mastery. Beneath the mash tun, the fire is kept low, a bed of glowing embers rather than leaping flames. The monks feed it sparingly, a few sticks of dry oak or beech at a time, ensuring the heat remains steady but never scalding. The sound of the fire is a companion in this space, the occasional pop of a splitting log, the soft hiss of sap meeting coals. One brother kneels to tend the flames, his robe brushing the earthen floor. He does not rush. Fire, like faith, must be tended with patience. Too much heat, and the mash will spoil. Too little, and the alchemy will not take place. The balance is delicate, known only by years of quiet observation. The waiting, once mixed, the mash is left to rest. The monks cover the tun with a thick woolen cloth to hold in the warmth, then step back, their hands clasped loosely before them. Some may kneel in prayer, others might sit on wooden stools, their eyes half closed in contemplation. The brewery is silent now, save for the occasional bubble rising through the mash, the faint sigh of settling grain. Time stretches. The light through the brewery's small, high windows shifts from morning's gold to midday's white. The monks return now and then to test the mash, dipping a finger to judge its sweetness, nodding in satisfaction as the liquid clings thickly to their skin. The lautering, separating the sweetness. When the waiting is done, the monks begin lautering, the slow filtering of the sugary liquid from the spent grain. They line a second vessel with woven straw or coarse linen, then ladle the mash into it, letting the liquid drain through. The sound is gentle, a trickle, then a steady drip, like rain from leaves after a storm. The spent grain, now drained of its sweetness, is set aside, not wasted, for the thrifty monks will use it to bake dense, hearty bread or feed the monastery's pigs. But the liquid, now called wort, is the prize. Pale gold, shimmering slightly in the firelight, its scent honeyed and warm. Closing thoughts. And so the monastery's brewers watch as the wort gathers in the kettle, drop by drop, as patient as the seasons. There is no urgency here, only the certainty that time will do its work. The fire murmurs, the straw filters, the sweet liquid pools, ready for the next step in its journey. The sweet wort now waits in the copper kettle, ready for its next transformation. Fire will awaken it once more, and into its golden depths the monks will add the gifts of the earth, bitter herbs, fragrant hops, balancing sweetness with wisdom, as all things must be balanced. The fire rekindled, the brewers coax the embers back to life, adding split logs of applewood or oak, chosen for their steady, even burn. The flames rise gently, licking the blackened underside of the kettle. At first, the wort lies still, its surface smooth as a polished mirror. But soon, tiny bubbles begin to form along the edges, trembling upward in slow procession. The monks stand close, though never hurried. One stirs the wort with a long wooden paddle, his motions wide and slow, preventing the delicate liquid from catching on the kettle's base. The steam thickens, carrying the scent of warm grain into the rafters. The herbalist's touch. In a corner of the brewery, another monk measures out dried herbs from small linen sacks. Each monastery's brew is unique, shaped by the plants that grow in its garden or the wilds beyond its walls. Some use bog myrtle, its leaves musty and sharp. Others prefer ground ivy, earthy and green. But most treasured of all are the hops, pale green cones, slightly sticky to the touch, their fragrance both floral and bitter. The monk crushes a handful between his palms, releasing their resinous scent, then scatters them into the kettle. The wort swallows them whole. Soon other herbs follow, perhaps a pinch of yarrow for keeping, a few juniper berries for brightness. The brew darkens slightly, its sweetness now laced with something deeper, more complex. The boil's slow song. For an hour or more, the wort simmers, the fire beneath it tended with care. The brewery fills with a humid warmth, the air thick with a smell of malt and herbs, like a meadow at the edge of a forest where sunlight meets shadow. The monks move quietly, skimming off foam with a shallow wooden ladle, tasting a drop now and then to judge the bitterness. There is no need for words. They know this brew as they know the verses of their prayers. A nod, a murmured approval, and the work continues. The cooling. When the boil is done, the fire is allowed to fade. The monks lift the kettle from the hearth with thick iron hooks, straining their backs, but never rushing. The wort must now cool, a slow return to stillness. Some monasteries let the night air do this work, leaving the kettle near an open window where the breeze can whisper across its surface. Others plunge cooled stones into the liquid, hissing as steam rises in fleeting clouds. However it is done, the waiting begins again. The wort rests, settling, letting the herb's essence steep deeper into its heart. The brewers sit nearby on rough-hewn benches, their hands folded, their breaths slow. The light through the windows is amber now, late afternoon, the sun slanting low, closing thoughts. And so the wort cools, its journey halfway done. The herbs have lent their wisdom. The fire has done its work. Soon the monks will add the final touch, the yeast, that silent living miracle, and the ale will begin its last, most secret transformation. But for now, there is only patience and the quiet of the brewery at day's end. Now comes the most mysterious step of all, the silent work of yeast, invisible yet vital. The cooled wort waits in the stillness of the monastery's cellar, and into it the monks will pour not just an ingredient, but a living breath. Here, in the dark, the ale will stir to life on its own. The yeast, a monk's most trusted servant, in a small crock, kept cool and covered in the brewery's shadows, rests the monastery's yeast, a treasured inheritance passed down through decades of brewing. Perhaps it was originally wild, captured from the air on a cloth left draped over ripe fruit. Or maybe it was given as a gift from another abbey, carried carefully in a wax-sealed jar. The head brewer lifts the lid, revealing the pale, frothy mixture within. The scent is faintly sour, like rising bread with a whisper of apples. He stirs it once, then pours it into the waiting wort, where it vanishes without a trace. The yeast needs no fanfare, only time, and the right conditions to work its quiet magic. The cellar, a sanctuary of darkness and patience. The fermentation barrels stand in a low-ceilinged cellar beneath the brewery, where the air is cool and still. The monks guide the inoculated wort into these vessels with slow precision, using the wooden funnels and ladles. The liquid glimmers faintly in the candlelight before disappearing into the oak staves. Once filled, the barrels are sealed, not tightly, for the yeast must breathe, but covered with loose cloth to keep out dust and insects. Some monks mark each barrel with a chalked prayer or blessing, a quiet plea for good fermentation. Then they retreat, leaving the ale to its solitude. The waiting begins. Fermentation is not a process to be hurried. For days the cellar remains undisturbed, save for the occasional brother descending the steps to listen. And if he presses his ear to the barrel, he may hear it. The faintest hiss, the barest pop of bubbles breaking the surface. The yeast is alive, feeding on the wort's sugars, transforming them into warmth and spirit. The air in the cellar changes too. The sharp, green scent of hops softens, replaced by something richer, like ripe grain, like the damp earth of the monastery's gardens after rain. If a monk draws near, he might catch the fragrance of the ale's first whispers of strength, a ritual of observation. Each morning and evening, the brewmaster returns to the cellar, lifting the cloth to peer inside. He does not stir nor interfere, only observes. A thin layer of foam, the croissant, forms on the surface, creamy and thick. He nods to himself, satisfied. The ale is healthy. Sometimes he dips a small wooden cup into the barrel, drawing out a taste. The liquid is still sweet, but now carries a prickle on the tongue, a warmth at the back of the throat. It is not yet ale, but it is no longer mere wort. The transformation is underway. Closing thoughts, and so the ale rests in the dark, cradled by oak, tended by time. The monks go about their other duties, praying, copying manuscripts, tending the gardens, but in the back of their minds, they know the yeast is working unseen. There is faith in this waiting, a trust that nature, when given care and patience, will provide. Days have passed since the yeast began its work. Now the fermentation slows, the bubbles growing lazy, the ale settling into itself. In the cool dimness of the cellar, the monks prepare to guide their brew to its next resting place, where it will mature, mellow, and become what it was always meant to be. Judging the moment, the head brewer kneels beside one of the barrels, his calloused hands resting lightly on the wood. He lifts the cloth covering the bunghole and inhales. No longer the sharp, yeasty froth of active fermentation, but a deeper, rounder aroma. The croissant has sunk, leaving behind only a thin lace of foam on the surface. He dips a tasting cup into the ale and brings it to his lips. The sweetness has faded, replaced by a gentle bitterness, a hint of earth, a clean, dry finish. It is ready. No parchment records this knowledge. It lives in the monk's senses, passed down through silent observation. Racking the ale, a task of stillness. The process is called racking, the careful transfer of the ale from the fermentation barrel to a clean cask, leaving behind the sediment of spent yeast and hop residue. Two monks work together, one holding a siphon made of hollowed elder wood, the other guiding the liquid's flow into the new vessel. The ale moves slowly, glinting in the candlelight as it slips through the tube. The cellar is silent save for the soft glug of liquid and the occasional scrape of a barrel being adjusted. The monks' robes brush against the stone floor as they shift position, but they do not speak. There is no need. The storage casks, oak and thyme. The new casks are older, their wood darkened by years of use. They have been scrubbed with boiling water and blessed with a pinch of salt to ward off souring spirits. As the ale fills them, the air carries the scent of seasoned oak, vanilla, smoke, the memory of forests long gone. Once full, the casks are sealed with wooden bungs tapped snugly into place. Some will be stored here in the cellar. Others may be sent to the monastery's guest house or traded to nearby villages, but all will wait, at least for a time. Good ale cannot be rushed. The cellar's quiet watch. With the work done, the monks retreat, leaving the ale to its solitude. The cellar is a world apart, cool in summer, sheltered from winter's bite. Here, the ale will clarify, its flavors marrying, its edges softening. In a few weeks, it will be ready to drink. In a few months, it will be at its peak. Occasionally, a brother will descend to check on the casks, running a hand along their curved sides as one might pat the flank of a trusted ox. No leaks, no off smells. All is as it should be. Closing thoughts. And so the ale rests again, this time in the embrace of oak, where time works its slow magic. Above, in the cloister, the monks go about their days, baking bread, copying psalms, tending the sick, but beneath their feet, the ale grows wiser, deeper, quieter. It is a patient companion, this brewing. It teaches without words. The day has come at last. The ale, once mere grain and water, now finished, waits in its cask, a living thing, ready to sustain. In the monastery's refectory, the brothers gather, their wooden cups set out before them. This is no feast, no raucous celebration, only the quiet joy of a craft perfected, a circle completed. The tapping. The cellarer, the monk entrusted with the abbey's provisions, selects a cask from the cool darkness of the cellar. He carries it to the refectory with care, the wood groaning slightly as the ale shifts within. Setting it upon a sturdy trestle, he takes a wooden mallet and taps the bung loose with 3 precise strikes. A hiss escapes. The sigh of ale meeting air for the first time in weeks. The scent that follows is rich and inviting. Toasted grain, a touch of herbal sharpness, the faintest whisper of oak. The monks nearby pause in their tasks, turning their heads slightly. They need not speak. The aroma says enough. The pouring. The first cups are filled slowly, held at an angle to prevent excess foam. The ale emerges clear, its color like polished amber in the refectory's candlelight. Tiny bubbles cling to the sides of the clay vessels, rising lazily to the surface. The cellarer tastes first, as is his right, a small sip to judge the brew's quality. He closes his eyes. The flavor unfolds, malt sweet at the front, then a delicate bitterness. Finally, a clean, dry finish that lingers like a well-remembered psalm. He nods. The ale is good. The serving one by one, the monks receive their portions, never overflowing, never meager, just enough. They cradle the cups in both hands, feeling the weight, the warmth, or coolness against their palms. Some murmur a quiet Deo gratias before drinking. Others simply bow their heads in thanks. The refectory is silent as they sip. No clinking of cups, no boisterous toasts, only the occasional soft sigh of satisfaction, the sound of a man refreshed after honest labor. The ale is not strong, but nourishing, not intoxicating, but comforting. It is, above all, a part of the day's rhythm, as natural as bread or prayer. The leftovers. Nothing wasted. What remains in the cask will be carefully rationed, some saved for the infirmary, where small beer aids digestion and eases pain, some set aside for guests, a sign of the monastery's hospitality. Even the dregs thick with yeast may be used to start the next brew or baked into dark, fortifying loaves. The monks finish their portions, then rise to continue their duties, some to the scriptorium, some to the gardens, some to the chapel for vespers. The empty cups are rinsed and stacked, ready for the next meal. The ale has done its work. Closing thoughts. And so the ale passes from cask to cup, from cup to lip, from lip to soul. It is a simple thing, this monastic brew. No grander than the bread it accompanies, no holier than the water that shaped it. Yet in its making and its sharing, there is a quiet truth. that even the humblest labor, done with care, becomes a kind of grace. Beyond the cloister walls, the world is often hungry, and so the monastery's ale becomes more than sustenance for the brothers. It becomes alms for the traveler, medicine for the sick, a thread connecting the abbey's quiet rhythm to the clamor of those in need. The guest house. Ale as welcome, the monastery's guest house stands near the gates, its floor strewn with fresh rushes, its hearth kept burning even in summer. Here, pilgrims rest their blistered feet, merchants shelter from spring rains, and beggars receive what the brothers can spare. To each, regardless of station, a wooden bowl of thick stew is given, and with it, a cup of the monastery's ale. Not the strongest brew, but one made for nourishment, slightly sweet, flecked with bits of floating herbs, sustaining. The guests drink slowly, their shoulders loosening. Some murmur thanks, others simply close their eyes. The ale does not erase their weariness, but it softens the edges, makes the road ahead seem shorter. The infirmary, lay as medicine. In the infirmary, the air smells of dried lavender and sour wound dressings. Here, the ale is weaker still, small beer, barely stronger than water, boiled to purity. The infirmarian mixes it with honey for the feverish, with ground willow bark for those in pain. An old monk, his hands trembling with ague, sips his portion obediently. The liquid is cool, slightly bitter, but the honey soothes his throat. Nearby, a lay brother recovering from a broken rib is given ale thickened with mashed oats, a gruel to strengthen him. Nothing is wasted, everything serves. The tithe, ale as trade. Not all the monastery's ale remains within its walls. Some is given as tithe to local peasants who work the abbey's fields. Some is traded to village taverns for goods the brothers cannot make themselves. Iron nails, glass for windows, salt for preserving fish. On market days, a wagon loaded with casks creaks down to the village square. The cellarer oversees the exchange, his ledger balanced with painstaking care. The villagers hand over their goods, a sack of wool here, a bundle of candles there, and in return receive ale that tastes unlike any brewed in common homes. Clearer, steadier, touched with herbs only monks seem to know. The seasons, ale as cycle. The brewery's work shifts with the year. In autumn, the ale is brewed stronger to last through winter's fasts. In spring, it runs lighter, suited to Lenten austerity. Some monasteries keep a special Christmas ale, spiced with precious cinnamon or ginger bought from faraway merchants, a rare indulgence, sipped slowly during the 12 days. Through it all, the rhythm remains. Grain to malt, malt to wort, wort to ale. The monks do not question the work, just as they do not question the turning of the liturgical calendar. Both are sacred in their constancy. Closing thoughts, and so the ale flows outward, from cloister to guest house, from infirmary to village, a quiet river of sustenance. The brothers ask for no praise, no payment beyond what is fair. They brew because it is needful. They give because it is right. In this, as in all things, their labor is a prayer made liquid. The monastery's oldest brewer stands before the mash tun, his hands resting on the worn wood like a priest at the altar. Beside him, a young novice watches, eyes wide, sleeves rolled up past his pale wrists. There are no books here, no written instructions, only the slow transfer of wisdom from one pair of hands to another. The lesson begins. The novice is silent as the master demonstrates. how to test the malt between thumb and forefinger for proper crush, how to pour the heated water in slow spirals to avoid scorching. The youth mimics each motion, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. "Not too fast," the old brewer murmurs, guiding the novice's wrist as he stirs. "The mash must feel your patience." His voice is barely above a whisper, as if the very air might steal the secrets. The novice nods, his brow furrowed in concentration. The tools of memory. Between tasks, the master shows the tools passed down through generations. The paddle worn smooth where 100 hands have gripped it. The oak mash tun bearing the knife-carved initials of brewers long dead. Each has its story, its purpose. "This ladle belonged to Brother Elric," the old monk says, running a thumb over its notched handle. He could judge a boil's readiness by the sound of bubbles alone. The novice turns the ladle in his hands as if hoping some of that knowledge might seep into his skin. The unwritten rules. Some lessons are not spoken aloud, only observed. The way the master always tastes the wort from the same spot near the tun's edge, the particular angle at which he holds the sieve when straining, hops the exact moment he decides the fermentation is complete. A decision made by instinct, not measurement. The novice watches it all, storing each detail in his mind like a scribe copying scripture. One day, he too will know these things without thinking. The first taste. When the novice's first brew is ready, a small batch, barely enough for 3 casks, the master pours 2 cups. They drink together in the brewery's quiet corner. The ale is acceptable, a touch too sweet, the body slightly thin. But the master nods. "Better than my first," he says, and the novice flushes with pride. There will be years of brewing ahead, of mistakes and slow refinements. But the chain remains unbroken. Closing thoughts. And so the knowledge passes, not in grand revelations, but in quiet moments. A corrected grip here, a shared taste there. The novice will forget many of his lessons, but he will remember the weight of the paddle in his hands, the scent of steam rising at dawn. These are the true texts, the living scriptures of the brewery. The last brew of the season is done. The casks are full, the tools cleaned and put away. As winter's first frost traces the brewery windows, the monks allow themselves a rare moment of stillness, not idleness, but the quiet satisfaction of work completed, of the circle closing once more. The tools at peace. The copper kettle hangs empty above cold ashes, its surface polished to a dull glow. Wooden paddles and ladles stand upright in a barrel near the door, their handles smoothed by months of use. The mash tun, scrubbed with salt and river sand, waits like a sleeping beast for spring's return. Brother Gerold, the oldest brewer, runs a hand along the tun's edge where generations of monks have worn a groove in the wood. His fingertips read the marks like braille, a history written in grain and time. The cellar's quiet bounty below in the cellar, this year's ale ages in the dark. Some casks will be drunk at Christmastide, their contents spiced with precious cinnamon. Others must wait until Easter, growing deeper and wiser with each passing month. The cellarer moves between the barrels, tapping one here, sniffing another there. He marks them with chalk, not dates or numbers, but small crosses and sigils only the brothers understand. The yeast still works, invisibly, in the silence. The first snow winter comes softly to the monastery. Snow blankets the herb garden where hops once grew, muffles the sound of brothers walking to matins. Inside the brewery, The air is cold but clean. No more steam clinging to the rafters, no more warmth from the hearth. Yet the space is not empty. The scent of malt lingers in the wood, the ghost of 1,000 brews past. If one presses a palm to the stones of the fermentation niche, they might still hold a memory of summer's heat. The promise of return. On the shortest day of the year, the abbot blesses the brewery with a sprig of last season's hops and a psalm. The monks stand in silence as the words echo off the cold walls. There is no hurry now. The barley sleeps in the granary. The yeast rests in its crock beneath a cloth. But in the scriptorium, the novice who brewed his first batch this year is drawing a margin illustration in the monastery's ledger. A tiny mash paddle, a barley stalk, steaming tun. The work continues, even in stillness. Final thoughts. And so the brewery sleeps, but not forever. The monks know this truth better than most, that every ending is a beginning in disguise. When the thaw comes, when the first green shoots appear, they will return, to grind, to stir, to wait. The ale will flow again. The fire will burn. The quiet work of hands and time will continue. But for now, there is rest and the peace of a task well done.